Hey everyone, it's Amy here, and I am excited to talk about a really important conversation around how to master client conversations. And so I wanted to bring this up because it was actually inspired by a conversation I had yesterday with an entrepreneur, and he was asking me about how I have mastered conversation, and I was like, what? It was really interesting because I haven't been asked this question before. And while people talk to me about communication and connection and how is it that I'm able to attract clients so easily, I had never been asked that question quite in that way, where he said, my biggest question for you today is, how do you become a master conversationalist, or how do you master conversations? And it really excited me because I thought, wow, the fact that he's even asking me this question says to me his experience of communicating with me. And it's something that I've always been passionate about, connecting with people and really deeply understanding them. And so I thought that today what I could do is use this opportunity to really share some of the things that have worked really well for me. Before we go into that, I would love to see who's on live right now. So if you're online, just go ahead and say hi and say where you're dialing in from or clicking in from. And we'd just love to see who's here. So go ahead and do that, and we'll give it a moment for others to join. And so in this conversation, I really had the chance to think about, like, what is it? What is it that I do that allows people to feel comfortable to talk to me even in the first time we chat, and maybe you're like this too, like where in an initial conversation with someone, I've oftentimes found people sharing with me some of their deeper thoughts and their life's experiences. And then at some point in their conversation with me, they're like, wow, I've never told this to anybody, and I just met you, and why is it that I'm telling it to you? And I'm always humbled and honored because I know that it's not always comfortable to share that information. And I also know that what I've done is created a space for them where they feel safe. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in. So for today, I'm going to share 2 steps to mastering client conversation. And even when talking to this entrepreneur yesterday about this very topic, what I was thinking about was that it's not just about what you're saying in your conversation with them, it's actually about the energetic space that you create. And I used to not ever think about energy or any of that, but what I noticed is that so often people are highly distracted. So maybe you or I are in a conversation, and even though we're looking at each other or talking with each other, we're really in this other space of like, what am I going to do for dinner tonight? Or when am I going to get this project done? Or I get to come up with a topic for my Facebook Live video. Or, there's sometimes a background conversation happening. And then especially for those of us who are coaches and entrepreneurs who are working with people every single day, if we're in this other conversation when we're talking to someone, then we're not really being present with them. And there's something in our nonverbal communication that might be conveying that, whether we're speaking over the phone or in person or even via Skype or Zoom. So here are the 2 things that I want to share with you. So the first thing is actually both of them are prior to having a conversation with a client. And this can also be relevant to your conversations in life. So, for example, prior to being on an enrollment conversation, for some of you, you call it sales conversations or strategy calls or discovery calls. So prior to even starting that conversation, there's something that I do that might be a little bit different. And I never really thought about it because I'm like, am I kind of weird that I do this? But it wasn't until I was interviewed on a group training call with another group of entrepreneurs, and they were asking me all these questions like, how do you do this? How do you do that? And I just went there. So here's something that I do that you can do also prior to your next conversation, whether it's with a client or even someone in your life, when you know you're highly distracted about other things in your life, whether you're stressed out about something or really excited about something, or maybe you're feeling like, oh, I've got to make some more sales, and so you're thinking about that instead of really being dedicated to the person you're talking to. So the first thing I do is, before I even start a conversation with someone, I just take a moment to clear myself, just clear my energy. And the way that I do that and you might laugh, but that's okay, is I imagine that there's an invisible box in front of me. So you can do this right now. Imagine that there's an invisible box in front of you, and then think about how there may be some things inside of you that are distracting you from the conversation you're about to have, okay? So think about how you can just pull those things out of you. So if you're stressed about something or thinking about something, physically pull those things out of you and put them in the box. Like actually like put them in this invisible box. So you're like, okay, I'm stressed about this or I'm thinking about that, and actually do this and put it in the box in front of you. And then once you feel clear, then grab the box from both sides and set it aside. So it doesn't mean that these things that you're thinking about are not going to be there later. You know, they very well could be, you know, they will be there later. These are thoughts, these are responsibilities. Hold on, let me close this window in front of me. There's noise out there. So you put it in the box, you set it aside, and that way what you're doing is you're really clearing space and energy to prepare yourself for the person you're about to talk to. And when you do that, then you're actually focusing on them instead of being caught up in this background conversation that's in your head. It's actually highly generous to do that, right? So when you do that, you can also think about how it's really not about me in this conversation, it's about them, and really focusing on them and what they're saying and what they're sharing. So that's step number one, is to put it in the box and set it aside. As crazy as that sounds, it just creates that clarity and that space for them. And then the second thing that I do is I create, like, I think about creating this sacred space. So it's kind of coming off of that step number one, which is to think about like really leaning in and listening to the person so that I can think about, what is it like to be in this person's shoes? What is it like to be in this person's heart? What is it like to be in this person's mind? Because when I'm really letting go of the things that are in the box, then I'm really doing everything I can to dedicate myself to the person I'm talking to and think about, like, what would it like if I were in their shoes? What would I want to share? Like, okay, let me say this in a different way. I've shared this with some of my clients recently. So if you think about the human being experience, right? Just think about it for a moment. At the core, we all want to feel heard, right? We want to feel heard. We want to feel validated. We want to feel understood, and we want to feel accepted, and at the very core, we want to feel loved, right? So when you think about it from that standpoint, when you can actually create a sacred space where the person you're talking to can feel all of those things, or at least feel heard, that is a highly generous way of being. It's a highly generous way of being. Like, we can tell when somebody's distracted. You know, when you'll either hear in their voice or there'll be an awkward pause when you ask them a question, like, are they really listening or are they just in their own world? So, and it's disrespectful if you think about it. You know, it's just like when people are talking, but then they're on their phones and they're, you know, I mean, there's so many distractions anymore. So if you really want to have that level of deep connection with someone and that level of really mastering a client conversation, it's not just about what you say, it's about creating that space. So I would love to see who's on here. I know we've only got a smaller group today, but if you want to just say who's on here, say hello, say what's, you know, is there something that's landing with you? Or even if you have a question about business, I'm here to help. So go ahead and post your questions or at least say hello so I know who's on. So once I do that, like once I put anything in the box and set it aside and then create that sacred space where people feel heard and validated and they feel accepted and they feel understood and they feel loved, it just opens up the space where they feel comfortable sharing with me what it is they're even thinking about or what they're going through, you know? So it's, hey Ken, hey Holly. So when you create that space, so for example, if any of you have any client calls coming up today, or if you're gonna have a conversation with an existing client or a potential future client, or even in your personal life, instead of taking things personally, which is something that I've had the joy of working on in myself, just think about, how can I just set aside my own stuff and really dedicate myself to them? And really think about, how can I make the biggest difference for them? And if I create that sacred space, then they're more likely to share with you what they're even going through. And also notice, like, if something's coming up for you where you're feeling triggered about something they're saying, then in that moment, you're making it about you, and then you're no longer in service to them. Does that make sense? So I just invite you to think about that, as you move forward with your day, and notice, like, what you're hearing them say and what can you do to deeply understand them. Ken, you're so sweet. Your words about being heard resonate with parenting. I find my kids almost exclusively get upset when they are not heard. Yeah, that's so true. And I know we've talked about this and how instead of just telling them things like, like when kids say why and you say because I said so, like I know we had a conversation about this and it's like, why should anyone ever say because I said so? Like I would never say that to anyone, so why would I say that to a child? Hey, Susan. It's just putting a little bit more thought into the words that you're saying and then really focusing on actively listening instead of thinking about the next thing you're going to say. Like I watch myself all the time because I know that obviously I'm someone who loves to chat and connect and talk about life, and I could go on and on and on. And if I'm not really leaning in and listening, I just might miss something, and I might miss the opportunity to make a difference for that person. And imagine if you were that one person in somebody's life, even if you weren't a loved one, that was able to create that sacred space for that person and actually say, you know what, I'm listening, I'm here for you, I want to know what's going on in your life. Or if you're a coach or a service-based entrepreneur, really leaning in and listening to saying, what is your vision? What do you really want in your life? Or what do you want when it comes to your health or your relationships? Or, what is that really big dream that you have? And just lean in and listen. And even if you've been coaching for multiple years, like I have, every single person counts. Like every single connection point counts. And even if you've asked that question many times, it may be the first time or the first time in a long time that someone has been asked that question. So I love it when I just lean in, I get the opportunity to lean in and just ask somebody, like, what's your dream? Like, what do you want? And then be quiet so I can actually create space for them to answer. Holly says, yes, as a child, I agree. My mom talks over me or doesn't listen. I get so frustrated. Yeah, but all of us have, a lot of us probably have stories about parents or, family members where we maybe didn't feel heard. I definitely can relate. Like I grew up with two older brothers, so I was just like the kid sister. And so I was always trying to be like tough like them, and like want to be cool enough to hang out with them. And sometimes that was not the case, like, oh, you're just a little girl or whatever. And so I think part of that though was my life's experience. So I could become a strong woman. So yeah, absolutely. So it's the same thing. Like it's, sometimes I'll even talk to my clients who also work with, I work with entrepreneurs, so they have their own set of clients, right? And so sometimes they'll come to me saying, yeah, I just had this interaction with my client and they seem unhappy with me, or they seem frustrated, or they're really battling like my coaching. And I'm like, okay, just don't make it about you and get to the heart of what's really coming up for them. So for those of you who are coaches, especially, if somebody is having a hard time, whether it's on a strategy call or if it's on an actual coaching call or in a group setting, instead of talking about the things that don't matter, just listen to what they're saying and really try to get to the core of it. Because oftentimes when people are complaining or frustrated, they're talking about things that don't even matter. So when I hear people just kind of spinning like that, I'll just lean in and really just try to listen for what's really happening here. And I'll even ask the question, so what's coming up for you right now? Just ask the question, right? Ask the question. And then as soon as you ask the question and then be quiet. Sometimes people will ask a question and they'll keep talking. And the whole point of asking the question is to create space and listen to what they even say. Susan says, the more I stay quiet and allow the conversations to blossom, the more beautiful and deep the connection becomes. Yes. Exactly. So this is what I think is so powerful that a lot of people are not talking about. Yes, and be quiet. Ask the question. I mean, sometimes when I'm just being blatant with my clients, when I'm teaching them about this, like especially in enrollment conversations, like ask the question and then shut up Even though I don't like saying shut up, I know that it just kind of cuts through. Just zip it. Like, ask the question and be quiet. What's coming up for you right now? And allow there to be a dramatic pause. Even if it feels like uncomfortable and forever, it will create space for the person you're talking to really take that question in and go, yeah, what is coming up for me right now? I love it when people ask me that. Like, if I'm stressed out about something or really overthinking things, like I sometimes do, and if someone that really is generous enough, or someone who really knows me is like, Amy, I feel like there's something else going on. What's coming up for you? I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that. Maybe it's not about these frivolous things. So yes, power in the pause. I love it. So yeah, what questions, I kind of got through these steps quickly today. So what questions do each of you have? Okay, let me ask more specifically. So thinking about where you are in your business today, what's the number one area that you need the most help with? Because this will also help. Oh, see, I didn't power the pause. What's the number one area you need help with? So go ahead and type it in. See, I get to keep talking because it's not a two-way conversation, but I get to see what you type in. What's the number one area you need the most help in? And this will help me also think about the most important topics to each of you, because I want to make sure that Chat with Amy is something that provides a lot of great value for you. So go ahead and type it in. And even for those of you watching the replay of this, go ahead and type it in, because I'll come back to the video and watch it and give you some feedback once I see your questions. So yeah, so go ahead and type it in. What else? So today, my number one focus is actually going to be all around what I've recently announced, which is, I know some of you heard me on my last call. And for those of you who are just joining me for the first time, I use Chat with Amy as a true conversation. Like, I don't always have it all scripted out because I want to flow like organically. So I know some of you have heard about me talking about this, and some of you have already hopped into this amazing, amazing experience that my team and I have created. So if you haven't heard about it, then go ahead and scroll down on this page and you'll see a video about my new offering called Powerhouse. And the reason why I'm bringing this up again is because some of you have not yet heard about it, and what we're doing is creating the most epic experience for powerhouse women entrepreneurs. So would love for you to check that out. There's my plug for the day. Okay, Holly, thank you for your question. How do you plan ahead for content? I want to plan my September, but not sure where to start. Okay, so Holly, can you be a little bit more specific? Like, content for, is it for a program? Is it for Facebook Live videos? Is it for a specific project you're working on? Go ahead and type that in. That's where I get to wait patiently. But to answer your question while I am waiting for your answer, how do you plan ahead for content? So what I think about, well, so there's several things. One of the things I think about is, what am I hearing from my ideal clients, right? So what am I hearing from people? What is the topic of conversation that keeps coming back to me? Or here's another one that all of you can use when you're creating content. What are your most frequently asked questions? What are your most frequently asked questions? Okay, Holly says, my emails, live, promotions, webinar, etc. Okay. So a couple things. What are your most frequently asked questions? And if you don't feel like you have frequently asked questions, then you can reach out to your clients or your ideal clients, even if you've got a circle of influence that's whether it's a small or large circle of influence. You can say, what can I help you with the most? Like what I'm doing right now, right? I'm asking you, so I'm not assuming what it is you need, but I'm asking, like surveying you what it is you need. So you can survey them, you can ask them, you can reach out to your top clients and just say, hey, what can you use the most help with right now, and use their answers to create content. The other thing is to use your life experiences when it comes to email copywriting. So I know this is one of my favorite topics is deep connection copywriting, right? So when you think about what's something that you feel like is a pain point for your ideal clients or for your existing clients. So for example, I was just thinking about my clients today, like what are they going through right now? One of the things that I'm hearing from a lot of my clients is wanting to find out what is their unique message, right? Like what do they want to become known for, and how can they differentiate themselves from the rest of the people in their industry, right? So I know that that's something that comes up for them. And what is, what's one thing that they can really put out there in the world that's really going to land with their ideal clients? So I may think about a topic around landing your unique marketing message, right? So I might talk about something like that. And when it's too broad, you want to bring it in. So for example, Holly, people love steps. So even for this particular Facebook Live video, I talked about 2 steps to, mastering client conversations. So if you can think about just a small number of steps, 2, 3, 5, 7 steps, maybe not any more than that, but then you can just really share 3 steps to, and then fill in the blank of something your ideal clients want, or my 5-step formula to achieve blank, things like that. Because when you're wanting to have a strong marketing hook, then it's about creating something that is received as something simple for people to implement right away. Okay, and then with webinars, you really want to think about what's going to capture their attention right away. Like, you only have a few seconds for the title of a webinar for people to decide, am I in or am I out? The same thing with online challenges. Like if you create a 5 or 10 day online challenge, or I know some of you do summits with, the teachings of Shanda Sumter, my amazing coach. And so when you think about it, what's really going to hook your ideal client? So, and I remember when I was first doing webinars, I felt like my initial titles were way too broad. So even if people saw them, if it was how to grow your coaching business, it's too broad. And so I remember one of my titles that did really well, and you can use this as a swipe file if you want to use your own wording in it, was how to attract 3 new, it's kind of a long title, how to attract 3 new clients from your personal Facebook page in 30 days, right? It was who doesn't want to be able to attract 3 high-paying clients from your personal Facebook page in 30 days? So if you want to come up with something like a hook like that, have it be really specific. Okay, Ken says, thank you, Ken. As a coach, balancing how much to talk versus listen, I see my value in what I can offer and say, but recognize how preaching loses people. What balance of speak, listen can best make people feel both heard and supported? That is also a great question. I mean, if I'm doing a one-on-one call, then I can really gauge that better, If I'm on a group call, I will talk for a certain amount of time, and then I'll typically create space to open it up for Q&A, or I'll ask a question, maybe I'll talk for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and have people taking notes, and then I'll open it up and say, okay, what are you hearing me say? What are you hearing me say? What is your biggest takeaway right now? And then if people are being shy, on a group call, for example, then I'll actually call on people, for those of you who have group programs, it's really good to establish that, let's have it be an engaging conversation. So I'll actually say, if there was a client named Tara, I'd say, Tara, why don't you start? So they get into the habit of answering my questions, and then it becomes more of a back and forth conversation. So it's not really a percentage for me, it's more of a noticing if people are paying attention, and that's why it's good to establish that. So, so what are you hearing me say? If my clients hear me ask that question here and there, then they know that I'm going to check in and see if they're paying attention. I'll also ask them to eliminate distractions. So I know this might not be fully answering question, Ken, but I ask them to fully eliminate distractions because, again, I know that people have so many things going on in their head and they've got technology around them pulling them in different directions. So that tends to help as well. So are there any more questions that any of you have for me? I'm happy to help. And again, if you're listening to this or watching this replay, go ahead and post your question below and I'll be happy to respond to your comments. So so was this helpful? I would love to see if this is helpful. You can give me some hearts, give me some love. And if this has been helpful, if you're willing to share it and so I can help more people, that'd be awesome. So finally, I just want to mention, I know that some of you have seen my posts about this, but in less than a month, I'm going to be speaking on an awesome stage. And I'm going to be with Jesse Itzler, Shanda Sumter, Rob Kosberg, Pete Vargas, Natalie Jill. So there's this amazing all-star cast of entrepreneurs who are going to be speaking at this event. So if you want to join me, I still have a few tickets left for this big event that's happening September 25th, 26th, and 27th. So comment below if you want to join me. I know some of you are already going. And I'll be happy to share with you my link. So I've got like a family and friends discount, at least through tomorrow. And then if you also join me as my guest, then I will also put you on my list for a VIP networking soiree the night before the 3-day event. And that's going to be a really intimate group, about 30 people or so. It's going to be super fun, so let me know. Okay, so on that note, I'm going to wrap this one up. I hope you found this helpful, and look forward to seeing your comments, and I will talk to you soon. Okay, bye.